Hi everyone, my name's Bailey. I'm a therapist getting my doctorate in counseling psychology, and this week I am reviewing The Courage to Be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitake Koga. So the book was originally published in Japanese in 2013. The English translation was published in 2017. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video so that I can show you a very special surprise. So the premise of this book is essentially based on the psychological theories of Alfred Adler, who was a psychologist around the time of Freud. It is set up as a dialogue between a youth and a philosopher, and they kind of just go back and forth debating Alfred Adler's ideas. And the main ones that they focus on are that the past, or like a person's past, is pretty much irrelevant, that all problems are interpersonal problems, and that you need to separate your tasks from other people. When it comes to the courage to be disliked part, it is essentially talking about how we need to fully accept ourselves, and if we're willing to be disliked, then we're happy, I think. I thought there were some good ideas sprinkled throughout. I feel like that's kind of a foreshadowing of the next section. But there were some ideas that I did really think were useful. For example, towards the end of the book, they're talking about having expectations for your children, and the philosopher, who is the one who's presenting all of Alfred Adler's ideas, they say that, you shouldn't base your love of your child off of what you hoped they would be. You should just start from zero, and the fact that they exist will bring you joy, and they can essentially do whatever they want, and that will make you happy because you're not putting them up against some other expectation. Just love your child for existing. I think that's a very compassionate way of viewing your role as a parent. I also liked some of the stuff around the separation of tasks. You should separate your tasks from other people's tasks. So, how other people feel about you or speak to you or whatever, that's their own stuff. And your tasks are only kind of focused on how you show up in the world, how you present. It honestly was kind of giving let them. I think the let them theory is a legitimately better book. If you think that the separation of tasks thing is useful, then I would recommend reading that instead of this. And I guess that leads me into the next section. Boy, oh boy, what didn't I like about this book? This is one of those books where there's so much I didn't like that I can't even focus on individual ideas because so much of the book was bothersome to me. The first thing is it's structured like a philosophy, like an introductory kind of philosophy text. I think it's supposed to be kind of reminiscent of Socratic dialogue, that kind of thing. If you're gonna write a book like it's a philosophy book, I'm going to assess it like a philosophy book. This is not a philosophically sound book at all. There are so many premises that just get tossed around and never get examined. The philosopher will just assert something and then they'll move on as if we all agreed that that thing is true. It says people who live in community naturally develop a desire to contribute to community, which perhaps that's true, but if this is a philosophical argument, you have to prove that that premise is true before you start using it in your argument. That's just like basic philosophy 101. You try to make this a philosophy style book, but you ruin it by not doing the philosophy thing. If you want to make a book about Alfred Adler's ideas, just do that. Make it a, psychology history book or something. If you want to make a philosophy book, make a philosophy book. This self help dressed up as philosophy makes it bad in both ways. Like, it's bad self help and it's bad philosophy. I hated it. There are also some, I talked about how there are some premises that are not ever examined. There's a lot of them that I totally disagree with. There's this assumption that humans have like a fundamental drive to dominate and overpower each other, which is just kind of said and then we just move on, I guess. It's like a weird capitalist argument about how this is kind of like human nature. And then we don't even talk about it again. And then we just like build an argument off of that. You can't build an argument off of premises that you didn't establish to be true. Okay. Anyway. Also, the idea, it kind of, I mean, it doesn't do a very good job, but it essentially goes off on Freud and says, like,
Freud would say that, you do everything because of your past, but Alfred Adler didn't think that was true. He says that your past doesn't matter and it's all about right here, right now.
I just think that's dumb. I feel like it's just a stupid way to try and empower people to act in the moment, which you can do that without telling them that their past is irrelevant. I've never worked with someone who has had trauma in their history and thought that, you know what would really help them is to tell them that their past has no impact on their present.
Huh?
Like, we know that that's not true. We know from a psychological perspective, we know from a neurobiological perspective, like your past literally has, okay, whatever. I don't feel like I need to argue the point that the past has significant impacts on your present behavior. It's essentially like they're trying to make an argument for free will without making the argument and just saying like, "Yep, see, like Freud says it was the past, but he's wrong. It's not. It's your free will right here right now." There were also some pieces about mental health that I found pretty upsetting beyond just the like ignoring the past. There was a discussion of depression and an individual who's depressed, and the philosopher person essentially says like, well, Freud would say that the depression came first, but really depression is just a way for this person to get something. It's useful genuinely to examine the reasons for doing the kinds of things that happen when you're depressed, but saying that you wanted the stuff that depression gets you so then you became depressed to get those things, it just like it doesn't really make sense and it's not even useful. And there was another example where there was a student, a female student, they kept emphasizing that it was a female student, which I guess is essential to know, who had a fear of blushing and was struggling to talk to people because she had this fear that something embarrassing would happen and she'd blush, which is a pretty common symptom in some like social anxiety, for example. The philosopher's argument was that like she developed the fear of blushing as an excuse to not have to talk to people. It was just like a way out so that she didn't have to talk to people. Is this based on human behavior? Like I don't know, man. I think yes, sometimes maybe that's the case. We develop these ideas in our head that help us avoid taking certain actions. If that's something that you feel like you resonate with, maybe look into acceptance and commitment therapy. The book also talks about how when you praise someone else, it's always motivated by your desire to manipulate them. You're just like manipulating them into wanting to do that thing or to thinking that you, okay, okay, great. So what? Like, why does everything have to be like these desires for you that you don't know about, but actually in reality you have a secret desire to like overpower and manipulate them and like reinforce that you have power over them if you compliment them or something? Why are we doing this? I'll say there were a lot of individual pieces I didn't like, but the book is so disjointed and all over the place that I can't even address them because the through line is not really clear. It talks about the courage to be disliked for a very, very small portion of the book, which I thought, crazy enough, would be the largest portion of the book because it's the title of the book. But that I thought was like one of the more interesting ideas, is like the courage to be disliked is a fundamental requirement if you want to live a happy life. That's interesting. That I feel like could genuinely be useful for people, or I don't know, contribute to self-help literature in some way. But it doesn't focus on that. It shifts from Like, it shifts between trauma and the past and praise and hierarchies and depression and and manipulation and community and altruism. It goes all over the place, and I think the philosophical structure of the book helps this happen because there will be parts where, they're arguing back and forth, and then they'll just say, well, let's move on from this for now. Even if they get back to it later, it's still confusing. I don't know. It's hard for me to summarize the book other than it's just a bunch of Alfred Adler's ideas, I guess. A little caveat here. I don't know if these are actually accurate to Alfred Adler's ideas. I never really studied Alfred Adler or read any of his literature, so this could be totally off. And if it is, it doesn't really matter anyways. The authors, I mean, I feel like they just really liked Alfred Adler and were like, let's try and figure out how to make this a self-help book. And then for some reason, people bought it. Okay, on to the rating section. How enjoyable was this book? I give this a 0 out of 5. I don't like reading bad philosophy books. I don't like reading bad self-help books. And I certainly don't like when I can't figure out what it's supposed to be. It was just not enjoyable from a philosophy perspective. It was not enjoyable from a self-help perspective. It wasn't written in a way that was particularly fun and interesting. I will say that, this is a translation, so there is something to be said for maybe the prose not being as flowing or something, but that really wasn't even the problem with the book. The problem was kind of the ideas and the way the ideas were presented. I couldn't track what was happening either. So I couldn't even figure out if I agreed with the ideas because I couldn't figure out what the ideas were. The next rating scale is how good is the advice in the book and will it actually help people? I give this a 1 out of 5. I think there are certain little snippets that if you took out of the book could be nice. For example, the thing about not having expectations of your children and just loving them for who they are, that's lovely and great advice, I think. Being willing to be disliked by people, I love that. But again, you have to go digging so far through bad ideas that it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. So I give it a 1 out of 5. If you're looking for good advice that will help you, I would look somewhere else. The next scale is the author in touch with real people's lives? I give this a 0 out of 5. As soon as you start telling me that depression is an excuse so that you don't have to do things, or that, the past doesn't exist or it's irrelevant or whatever, you just lose me. I just feel like it's so out of touch with what people want and need. And maybe I'm out of touch because these books are like major bestsellers. Yeah, I give this a 0 out of 5. I can't figure out who would see themselves in this book. So the last rating scale is how much evidence is there for what is in this book? I give this a 1 out of 5. There's no references. There's no science, which I guess is good because they don't say that there is any science in the book, really. So that's a plus. But it's just all the ideas of one person. So it's essentially just like saying that you agree with the opinions of this person who had opinions. But even as a philosophy book, like philosophy text, you can use the text itself to create evidence, right, through logical argumentation. That's the whole point. But this book doesn't do that either. So I might knock it down to a 0 out of 5. Okay, I give this a 0 out of 5 for evidence. I feel like I'm just angry now. Would I ever recommend this book to a client? This is another one where that question's a joke. To give a client a book and have them open it up and see like the past doesn't exist and your trauma is not anything relevant to how you act right now. You're choosing to act how you act right now. It's not related to the fact that you have trauma. It's giving this book to a client, I think, would be actively harmful. It would be confusing and harmful. If you're someone who wants to know if self-help actually holds up, please consider subscribing to my channel, watching my other videos, liking, leaving a comment. Any interaction that y'all have with me really helps me know that this is useful to you, and even though I do have the courage to be disliked, liked is better. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! Welcome everyone to the super secret, freely available, you could just fast forward to it section of the video. If you waited around this long, I appreciate you. And here is my secret surprise. This is a photo of my cat. Isn't she cute? Her name is Kona. She's currently under my desk. She's so cute. I hope you enjoyed my super special surprise, and I'll see you at the end of the next video.